Back in February, and even further back than that, the committee requested that staff take a look at several opportunities for us to reduce gun violence in our community. And in terms of what is existing in several other communities, the number one thing that we found cities doing, which kind of made sense for us, and that's the proposed ordinance you will be looking at today, is to, instead of having a regular retail permit for these stores, we would go to a conditional use permit. Several other questions were brought forth regarding liability insurance, regarding security, regarding minors coming into these facilities, and most of those are addressed at the federal level through alcohol, tobacco, firearms, and explosives, or at the state level through the Department of Justice. That allows us the flexibility to determine if we want to, as a city, require additional conditions.
First and foremost was, what's the problem? And I think that's right on there where you said gun violence. And one of the biggest problems that we have is gun thefts. And it's not with the commercial establishments, it's more residential.
When's the last time we had a gun store, a theft, or even a robbery of a gun store in the city limits?
There's been none within the last 5 years. You'd have to go back over a decade.
I was going back and thinking, I can't remember 20 years, maybe the old Armour, maybe if that even happened in the 80s, but I can't think of anything that happens about the increased security. But they just, are we going to ask people to have security guards when they have, alarms and everything else in place there? But another concern I have also was about the minors on the premises, under 18 as an adult, and I have some concerns, given that we have people that go to war, serve this country, or even we have people that serve law enforcement that are 18 and under 21 that can serve, and they can't go into a gun store. I mean, there might be certain exclusions from that, but how do you apply that across the board, and people can't go in there?
To me, this is a step in a process of looking at firearms and ammunition. And I think you brought up some of the other issues that we talked about. I'd like to continue talking about those. What conditions are set, whether it's age or others, is certainly something that we'll deal with as we go. The theft piece, to me, is not the most important. It's really the concentration factor. And for me, it is about setting a statement as much as anything else that this is an important issue to us.
One criticism I have that in neither of these cases were any of the gun stores contacted for input or were even notified that this hearing was coming up in either case. So I think that's an oversight that should be addressed in the future. Also, one thing to note when it comes to inspections, not only does ATF do it, but Cal DOJ does it. And I know Chris Folster, who owns Broadway Bait, told me that he sometimes gets inspected twice a year, along with BATF. So I know that in the current proposal, there is no proposal to have inspections for the city, but it's not needed. This is frankly the worst language I've ever seen and should be dropped. There's no point to it. It's analogous to there are cars on the city streets. Does the city need to have its own DMV and licensed drivers separately and licensed cars separately from the state? No, they don't.
I really believe that this ordinance is a solution looking for a problem. I believe has already been brought up by the representative from the Sacramento Police Department that we're not dealing with an issue of firearm thefts from dealers. In our desire to do something to curb gun violence, we're doing the one thing that we can, which, oh, by the way, does absolutely nothing to curb gun violence. In fact, what this ordinance does, in its best case scenario, if implemented constitutionally and done appropriately, will not reduce gun violence, but all it will do is create additional paperwork and put additional onus on one segment of Sacramento's business community. If implemented improperly, could result in numerous lawsuits and litigation. I think some of the things that have been brought up earlier, some of the proposals brought up from the February 21st report, which were deemed as or stated to be legally defensible, are in fact not constitutionally defensible. There is no upside to this particular ordinance, with the exception of to point out that we don't like guns. And that's all that this particular ordinance does. I would encourage you to not